that was 2008, and it changed my life. So I've taken part in like 12 different brigades everywhere from the Rideau Canal to the Mackenzie River to the Columbia. I think I've paddled pretty close to 7,000 kilometers in a Voyageur canoe.
Welcome to the Wilderness Wavelength Podcast.
This is it, an episode of the Wilderness Wavelength Podcast. Welcome to it. My name is George. Scott Sunderwald back on the show.
Yeah, hi, George.
Hey, Scott. And you've been really pumping this guy. You're excited. Can you introduce our guest tonight?
I'm stoked. We got a firecracker here tonight. We got Rick Zroback. I've known Rick for, 20 years. We've been friends, been on a lot of committees together, done some partnerships as well. So I'll do a quick intro before we dive in here. So Rick knows everything about canoeing and Voyageur Canoeing that you could ever hope to hear. He's the former president of the Athabasca River Voyageur Canoe Brigade. Ooh. He paddled with the David Thompson Brigade back in 2008. They crossed through 4 provinces, over 3,300 kilometers from Rocky Mountain House in Alberta to Old Fort William, Ontario. That's the northeastern part of the province. He's also paddled the Columbia River in Oregon. He's paddled the Mackenzie. He's paddled through parts of British Columbia, the Northwest Territories. He's done the North Saskatchewan River. All told, he figures over 110 rivers, and that's not counting any of the lakes. So it's great to have him here tonight. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you. It's great being here. Great introduction.
That was good. Wow.
Thank you.
Rick, what got you into canoeing? How long have you been doing it for?
I've been thinking about that a lot. I have a standard answer, but I really think it goes back to being in school and studying the voyageurs in Coeur d'Alene and the canoe. I really think that was kind of it. But where it happened to me in my late teens, early 20s was, if you've got people that are listening to this podcast that are my generation or maybe a bit younger or older, they may remember in 1967, we had 10 Voyageur canoes race from Rocky Mountain House to Montreal to celebrate Canada's centennial.
Wow, cool.
In 100 years. So it was 8 provinces and 2 territories.
Yeah.
And I remember I was actually late for work. I was working at that time a 4 to 12 shift, a summer student at the local. I'm from Kenora, Ontario, and I actually followed them on, I was about to say online. I followed them, CBC, television, newspapers, this really crazy amazing race put together of the provinces honoring, our history, 100th anniversary of Canada, the centennial, but also making it into kind of a competition and stuff. So I remember them racing into Kenora, and what they would do is they would paddle all day, and then maybe 2 Ks before they got to a place, then it was game on for race, and their time would be accumulated like that.
Okay, yeah.
You know what I mean? So my question back to you, which province do you think won?
Man, all the provinces going. I feel like, I want to go with Alberta.
I got to go Alberta.
No, Alberta I think was 4th. Okay. Manitoba. And most of their paddlers were guys from northern Flin Flon, the Paw.
Okay.
And canoe racing was big back then. Anyway, sorry. So that was one thing, and it was an inspiration for me.
I had to do some research. I've been spending a lot, like this week, researching Voyageur Canoe. But can you break down, like, what is a Voyageur Canoe?
Oh, a great question. It at the time would have been called the Canoe du Nord, the Canoe of the North.
Okay.
It's about 25 feet long. Yeah. Obviously, it was made out of birch bark, and they had spruce to root to tie it in. They used pitch to make it waterproof. But that was the canoe that was used essentially, and it would have been other places. When you got to Lake Superior, they had canoes that were, on Lake Superior, were like almost 40 feet long. They were like freighters, and I forget what they were called. But when you got to Thunder Bay with the fur trade, you had to have smaller boats. So that was the Voyageur canoe, a 25-foot canoe
Yeah.
that was used all over Western Canada and the United States. And you have to remember, there was no real borders. So when we think of the voyageurs in the fur trade, it wasn't just Canada. It was wherever the water went and the fur was.
And your 25 footers, you're sitting 8 people in there?
Well, what we do now, you can do 8, but 6 is a good another 6 seats.
Yeah.
Seat 1, 2, 3, right back to the stern, seat 6. And when I've done these brigades, I paddle with 7 or 8 people. But if you have 6 people in unison that know how to paddle and paddle in unison, you can really go. You fly. Let's put it this way. I've been in situations where somebody's been in a tandem and think they're going to paddle with us.
Yeah.
Not a chance. You can't. You just don't have enough firepower.
Yeah, I suppose. Hey.
So when you're starting in Rocky Mountain House, like, are you having to get the canoe out a fair bit of times and, portage it across spots? Or
Oh,
can you
okay.
make it-
So when I talk about this, we kind of cheated a bit. Let's
Okay.
get that out of the way.
Yeah.
We had car support,
Okay. Yeah.
and here would be a typical day. Like
Yeah.
a typical day would probably be maybe 70 kilometers. And what you would love to do is break it into 2 if there was a place to pull out.
Yeah.
There's sometimes you had to paddle all day. And the longest I did do was from Nipawin to Cumberland House, Saskatchewan, 110 Ks one day.
Wow.
That was a long day. That was at the end of, that was in the North Saskatchewan. But what you tried to do is, so you have a team of 9 people, 3 people would sit out and they would move your vehicle and all your tents and
yeah.
gear, and then you would meet them partway down.
Yeah.
And how did they know where to go when you're in the middle of Saskatchewan? We actually had a road crew putting like signposts up, brigade and stuff.
Okay.
So you're on Township Road 427 in the middle of nowhere, but you found the river.
Yeah.
And but yeah, okay. Sorry, there was something else I was going to say, but yeah. So and that was what I wanted to say when you're on these canoe brigades, and especially. They still go on. There's the Canadian Voyageur Brigade Society. I was a director. This year they're going to have one basically going from Victoria
Yeah.
to Nanaimo. They're on the ocean and they're going to
cool.
camp.
Oh, wow.
But with us, when we did these big ones, I don't know if you guys have ever been in a circus or been a gypsy. That's what we were. We were totally transient gypsies.
Yeah.
Paddle, set up your camp, chow down your food, find out what you're going to do the next day, go to sleep, up at 5:30, put your gear back, pack up and move on. And you just went from town to town to town to all across Western Canada. And it really was really fulfilling. It changed my life.
Yeah.
Totally changed my life.
You ever try something like that, Scott?
Yeah, well, because of working with Rick on a few projects, I've had a chance to paddle in the Voyageur canoes when I've helped unload them and load them up. They're heavy, they're big.
And you're trolling your fishing rod behind.
Yeah, well, that's just it. I do a lot of canoeing, but mostly for fishing, and I've done some river stuff. But my experience is a pinprick compared to what Rick's done. I guess a question I have for you, Rick, here is about the living history of the voyageurs. Like, you more than anyone I know would be able to speak to what they went through. And I've studied the voyageurs. I've studied fur trade history quite a bit. And, but what people forget is they were often paddling against the current.
Yep.
They had no life jackets.
Yep.
They were contending with bears, mosquitoes, hostile enemies, lack of food,
Rain,
white water, cold weather, and team conflicts, just to name a few of the problems, right? And so there you are, all these days on the water. Tell us about how you kind of got into that mindset. How do you think about those express brigades now and the voyageurs and what they did?
And comparing 1797 to 2008, I'm just going to do a little. I mean, we have all the luxuries that we could have, right? We have Kevlar canoes. We have Gore-Tex raincoats.
right.
We have a Safeway down the road. We have a liquor store.
You have life jackets.
Life jackets. You know, we had amenities. So on a scale of 1 to 10, a hardcore Voyageur from the late 1700s, 1800s being 10, we were probably about a 2. And what I mean by that is that, yeah, we had to camp out. Yeah, we had to be outside, and we had horrible rain, and we had weather and headwinds and stuff. I think the thing that brought me the closest to them is especially when the North Saskatchewan River, but especially Quetico, because we were camping all the time and we were using the actual fur trade routes and using the same portages. There's no dams anymore, or no dams have been built there. Camping at the same places, and you really got, even no matter where you were, you got into feeling the rhythm of the river and the rhythm of being outside and the spirit of paddling together. And it was really interesting when we did the one in David Thompson in 2008. We did it. But in 2011, when we did the Columbia, there was a canoe of about 9 people that had worked as interpreters at Old Fort William. They knew all the songs.
Oh, wow.
And they would be singing, French songs that if you were a Voyageur back then, you'd be singing that, because that was your highlight.
Your motivation, right?
Totally. And it was,
keep the
that
team
was
together,
really
keep the
inspiring.
rhythm. Yeah, all of that.
And a typical day for them, I mean, they'd be up at 5. They would paddle 2 or 3 hours and chow down on pemmican or something.
Hardtack.
Their highlight of the day would be paddle for just about an hour and stop and have a pipe.
Right. All those little
Because
clay
everybody
pipes.
smoked a pipe.
That's right. Did you ever paddle against the current?
Oh, totally.
And what was that like?
Thank you. That's a great question. Because if somebody had told me in the spring of 2008 when we left here, as we were going down to North Saskatchewan, and then we're doing the big lakes and stuff, and then we were on the Assiniboine River and Red Deer River, we were still going downstream. Then we hit the Winnipeg River, which is the Winnipeg River empties into Lake Winnipeg and hooks into the Lake of the Woods, Rainy River. Anyway, so we were upstream paddling, and I thought it would have been not that much fun, but I was fortunate enough of our team. I stern paddled all the time. I never gave it up, and I learned a ton of. I'm a pretty accomplished stern paddler, but in a Voyageur canoe with 6 people, you go to another level. And going upstream, we would basically follow the shoreline. That's where your least current is. You wanted to be far enough away that the people paddling on that side of the canoe weren't hitting bottom, you know?
Yeah.
And you had points coming out. So you're obviously not going as fast as going downhill or downstream. Where'd I get downhill? But you were almost like paddling whitewater downstream because you were dodging rocks. You were always constantly, you were focused. And I think you know me, Scott. I'm not the most focused guy in the world, but I get in the stern of a canoe, I become very focused.
It must be.
So it was really a brand new challenge, and we nailed it. We actually, we were voyageurs there. If you wanted to be, because they didn't want to carry stuff, they would go out of their way to try to really, a lot of times it'd be the water wouldn't be that fast, so you move, but then you got maybe a chute. Mm-hmm. You know, you would try to do what's called a jet ferry. You'd blast across the river and try to paddle more than carry as much as you could. Yeah. And we got very prolific at it.
Well, and the reason I ask that is I've done some river canoeing, even the Athabasca here, and just with 2 men in a canoe fighting the current is hard. And I was thinking these voyageurs are doing this across country.
And with gear?
With gear loaded with furs and pots and pans and muskets. I just can't imagine. And I've seen drawings where they had to get out and tie ropes and pull the damn thing just to make it along. So very difficult.
I'm not going. By your mid-30s, you were burnt out.
You're burned
out. It was over.
I think a 40-year-old Voyageur
like
was
16
done.
to 35.
Yeah.
And they would not. Whenever you read this, Scott, and they wouldn't live another lifestyle. They were the cream of the crop. Yeah. And they were proud as heck of being that person.
Yeah.
And they were carrying 200-pound packs over portages. And,
Well, in mountain ranges like the
oh,
Athabasca
just
Pass.
on and
Yeah.
on. It's,
Yeah.
I mean, so we paddled, but as far as what those people did to open up North America, and I always love telling people that really don't know, Canada, Western Canada, Canada basically opened up because of men's fashion. Top hat. Going
Yeah.
after a beaver
Gotta get a
pelt.
beaver, yeah.
Men's fashion.
Yeah.
I mean, we're sitting around in jeans. What fashion?
When you
Right.
when you got 6 people in one of those canoes and you're flying down the river, are you guys tipping it? Like, is that something that's happening?
Well, we've tipped.
Yeah.
And, but before we go into that, we switch. You don't stay in the right side. So about every, I don't know, I think the first time we did it would be about 60 strokes.
Yeah.
And you'd have a command coming from seat 5, something like, ready? And everybody answers back, ready. And you go, 3, 2, 1, and you slit. And you got to
Oh,
make sure
wow.
you do that in unison. You know what I mean? And you got to make sure you're following the person in front of you. So I was on a situation on the Fraser River, and it was a total botch switch. There was a guy that was a big guy, and he blasted from right side to left side, and we were over in a heartbeat. And
Yeah.
it turned out to be it turned out well because we were actually heading into a log boom. You have those big booms.
Yeah.
And there was also one of these big posts sticking up. Our canoe was going to bend around it, and we pushed it. Long story short, it turned out okay. But that's when the captain takes over, and there was a lot of four-letter language going on. 4-letter words, and we'll leave it at that. But it was
So you
stay away.
capsize a big, heavy canoe like that. That's even harder
And
than a
you could
regular
turn them
canoe.
over, but in the river, we were close to shore. Like in a lake, when people take Voyageur canoes, you have to practice that. And they flip over pretty easy. Somebody's got to slide in, start emptying out water in the middle, and then you feel, you can get back in. But as anybody gets back in, you're throwing water out, and the canoe is incredibly unstable.
But the
you
gunnels are
can do
pretty
it.
high. How do you get someone out of the water
Well,
into?
you just kind of you'd have somebody on the other side holding,
Yeah.
and you kind of kick your feet, and we have straps. You
Oh.
can step in and slide
I
in.
see. Okay. Wow.
Yep.
Yeah, that's next
It's
level.
no fun.
No.
It's no fun.
Canoeing's
We
great
actually had a
until
guy-
you capsize. Right?
I'm not going to mention the fellow's name, but you find out idiosyncrasies of individuals in a lot of ways. But a Voyageur canoe, the person that works the hardest and has to be the most, I mean, your stern person is the captain, and he or she's steering, but your bow person sets the pace. They're out there by themselves in their own little world.
Yeah.
So if you have somebody in front of the canoe that likes looking at birds and bees, wrong person. Wrong person. You gotta have somebody that's just digging in. And there was this fellow that we had that I figured right away he'd be a good bow paddler, and he was. And when we went over, I was so angry, but I'm not getting into it. And at the end of it, I asked this individual, a very quirky, kind of different guy, I go, what was your favorite thing in the brigade? Going over.
So a friend of mine did one of those races, might even have done the millennial race. I've got to check in with her. But she, as a woman, was talking about the awkwardness of having to pee and defecate when you're on a big lake and you're with a mixed brigade.
Oh, yeah.
You're not pulling over to shore for a discreet toilet
I
time.
can't believe- can I tell you my
we
pee
need to
story?
know. We need, it's like when you talk to an astronaut about going into space. Everybody wants to know, how do you go to the bathroom?
Yeah.
The same
Well,
thing.
what we
How
did-
do you go to the bathroom in a Voyageur canoe with
what
the
we
whole
did
crew?
when we did the brigades, we would call it a bio break, and we had men and women, and you'd go to shore, women head off to the left and men to the right, and you did your thing. But when we were on Rainy River, which is like Northwestern Ontario, and it's a wonderful story. It was a hot day, and it was like about 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and we probably had another couple hours of paddling, but it was like a plus 30 day. And canoeing in a hot day for a long period can eat you up pretty easily.
Oh yeah.
And when you have 6 people trying to concentrate to make sure you're doing you can lose focus pretty easily. Anyways, we pulled over at the shore, and most of Canada's bush. You just pulled over somewhere to go to the bathroom. And we all pull over, we get out, and all of a sudden there's a guy standing there. And we're like, and we look, and there's a house. and we're like apologetic as heck to this gentleman. Sorry, we have to go to the bathroom. And he was over the moon because he'd heard of us.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, I'm not kidding you, gallons of ice cream. And he was giving us pop and ice cream, and he was over the moon that we had stopped there. And then we actually invited in another couple other canoes, and this guy took care of us.
Oh, wow.
And down. So those kind of heartwarming things are pretty special.
Yeah.
When you're doing that trip, like the one you did in 2008 from Rocky Mountain to Northwestern Ontario,
Yeah.
how long does that trip take?
65 days.
65 days.
65 days.
And you guys are paddling every day.
No, we'd have the odd day off, and we had a couple days the one day that I actually in my book refer to the Lake Manitoba story. And
21st Century Voyageur is your book.
yes, 21st.
Is that one about like this trip specifically?
3/4 of that book is about that.
Okay, cool.
And I actually carried a dictaphone.
Yeah.
And about every second night at lying on my tent, I talked for 5-10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe when I finally sat down to start writing, and it took 14 years, that dictaphone, it's amazing. It's like, Cole's notes.
Yeah.
And then you had those notes, and it all just came back.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
But when we were in Lake Manitoba, and it's kind of the same thing about the generosity and the openness of Canadians. We got on the lake, and we knew it was going to be a rainy day, and we hugged the east shore. And when we started, there was a tailwind, little windy, overcast. But, and we wouldn't be more than 100 meters from shore. We weren't going to, I don't know if people realize this, but when you look at Manitoba, you hear the lake, you hear the Great Lakes.
Yeah.
Well, Lake Manitoba, Lake Winnipegosis, Lake Winnipeg are Great Lakes.
Massive.
Yeah.
They're massive, massive lakes. You're not
Big
seeing the
waves.
other shore, So we were pretty fortunate with good weather most of the time, except this one time. So here we are. We did a crew change, and if we weren't that efficient, if we had been 20 minutes behind, we probably would all bailed.
Yeah.
Because the rain was coming, but we started and we were about a half an hour away, and it just started coming down in torrents. And you're in trouble when you take your glasses off so you can see better.
Yeah.
And so we actually pulled over to shore. There was 10 canoes, so you got 60 people. Nobody was hypothermic, but it was time to shut her down. And at that time, cell phones were just starting. Nobody
Okay.
had, everybody, if now you had 60 people, you have 60 cell phones.
Yeah.
And I think we had 1 or 2. So we, bottom line, is pulled the canoes and started walking. And we knew there'd be a road or a farm, right?
Yeah.
So we walked through these fields, over barbed wire fences, set off a stampede of cattle and stuff. And out of the fog, we could see a house. And we ended up going to this house, and here's these people. They're sitting in their house, looking out their kitchen window, having coffee, and out of the gloom comes 60 people out of
60
nowhere
voyageurs.
from the lake. And these people, these wonderful people, I think their names were Johansson, took us in, hot coffee, chocolate, and till we connected, and took us
Wow.
into their homes. So it was just, and I've got that all written up. That was a pretty magical time, to be really honest.
Yeah, we as we mentioned before we even started recording, that if you want to see or read Rick's book here, you can email Rick, zro@gmail.com, and you said you're getting
Rick's Row.
Rick's Row. Yeah, you're low on copies right now too. So
Well, yeah, so they're a hot item.
He's sold out, man. Time for a
I sure hope
reprint.
so. Christmas present.
there you go.
And
That's a
I
good one.
personally signed them.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'm gonna get one tonight from you here.
Oh, good.
Is there-
Got one here for you?
Is there a Voyageur scene in Alberta then? Like, Scott
There's
kinda
actually a
mentioned in the
pretty
intro.
good Voyageur scene in Canada.
Yeah.
The Canadian Voyageur Brigade Society. I was a director up until last year, and there's a new generation. Like anything, you want it to continue on.
Yeah.
But last year there was a brigade on the Athabasca, and there was a brigade in Nova Scotia, and this year there's one. 2 years ago was North was the Athabasca, and last year there was one in Nova Scotia at Cape Breton Islands.
Okay.
And this year there's this one that I mentioned, and there might be more coming up.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty active group.
Yeah.
It's pretty active.
Cool.
And it all, there was the 1967 thing, but 2008, there were a bunch of people, mostly Edmontonians, that wanted to honor David Thompson, easily the best land cartographer of all time.
Yeah.
I mean, his maps were still used of Western Canada up
Yeah.
until the early 1900s. So 2008, we were reenacting him traveling back to, he didn't go all the way to Thunder Bay. Yeah, you started Rocky Mountain House. He went to about Fort Francis and back to Rocky to tell the Northwest Company that he'd found a way to the Columbia River, which the Columbia, they knew that would take them to the Pacific.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, and then 2011,
1811.
that was 1808. And then in 1811,
Yeah.
1810, and you know a little more about, we can work on this, Scott. He came through this area right now in December, right?
Yep.
Up the Athabasca
Oh,
and
boy.
camped in Brule, like
Yep.
at Christmas time.
It's half
right?
frozen right
He,
now.
he complained about the howling winds and the sandstorms. Yeah.
Yes, and then he left, I think in the first part of January, and then they weren't canoeing, obviously. They were on snowshoes and hauling sleds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And-
just so people get the sense
Yeah.
of David Thompson's accomplishments, the Americans rightfully are super proud of Lewis and Clark expeditions.
Yeah,
that's
the
big.
one. Yeah.
But Lewis and Clark looks like a drop in the bucket compared to what David Thompson did. And his wife was along for most
Yeah,
of it.
she wasn't
Charlotte,
on,
right?
But Charlotte Small.
Charlotte
absolutely.
Small, yeah,
Well,
so-
I can actually add to that as far as somebody who did in 2011. We wanted to reenact, and it started down at Invermere, and we did different rivers: the Kootenay, the Pend Oreille, and the Columbia. Like he was in that area.
Yeah.
But long story short, when we were on the Columbia and the Kootenay, before we got this where the Snake River comes into the Columbia, that's David Thompson country. It's not Lewis and Clark country. And there's like people knew, you think the Americans just know all their stuff about and they're proud of their heritage and their history.
Yeah.
But they knew a lot about David Thompson. I was taken aback by that.
Yeah.
How much knowledge there was.
Well,
you know.
and I want to, make mention of the Iroquois or indigenous knowledge, because he had an Iroquois guide at the time in 1811. So the Iroquois tribe was from eastern Canada.
They were good paddlers.
Good paddlers.
Good paddlers.
But here's where it gets bizarre. This Iroquois guide comes to Brule and knows the way across the Athabasca Pass to the Columbia River, which I don't even know that, and I've lived here 20 years. So the knowledge that these indigenous people had of the whole continent just blows your mind.
David Thompson wasn't the first guy.
No,
but he was the first
absolutely.
guy of renown and used the knowledge
He's
of somebody
first
like
white
that.
guy.
Yeah, no.
But the fact
yeah.
that
Yeah.
an indigenous person from
Yeah.
the far end of
Yeah,
the
and
continent,
we're not talking Cree.
No. Like way the heck out there, knew the way across the Athabasca Pass to the Pacific Ocean. That just shows you the established trade routes that were here long before white man contact, right? Yeah.
So
Blows your mind.
the Voyageur Canoe, that was 2008, and it changed my life. So I've taken part in like 12 different brigades everywhere from
Yeah.
the Rideau Canal to the Mackenzie River to the Columbia. I think I've paddled pretty close to 7,000 kilometers in a
Yeah.
Voyageur Canoe in the last 15 years.
So,
15 years.
what kind of wear and tear on the body? Because, man, I sit in a canoe for 2 hours fishing and my back is screaming.
Well, my left shoulder's shot.
Yeah,
But-
like wrists and shoulders and arms.
But
and-
I pride myself, especially 2008. You know, I was a young guy then. I was 59, turned 60. And now the other thing I wanted to tell you, you asked how I got into it. I got an email from a friend in 2007, and he mentioned this brigade that was happening. And I remember the Voyageurs, the Centennial Canoe Race. I knew I'd be turning 60, and I knew I'd be going through my hometown of Kenora. So how often in your life do you get
Yeah.
a chance to paddle home?
Yeah.
And I talk all about that. I mean, the emotion of, you know, family members and all of that. It was that was a drive for me.
Yeah.
That really drove me. And it kind of, when I got there, hey, Rick, you still got 3 more weeks to go. Oh, you know. But anyway, sorry.
So you said hi and bye to your home?
Yeah. But, yeah.
Scott mentioned in the intro that you've paddled like at least 110 rivers.
And I think we should talk up Hinton area, and I'm glad you did, because my background of paddling,
Yeah.
when you meet people from Ontario, Eastern Ontario is a hotbed of canoeing. You meet all kinds of people that have done summer camps and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I never really paddled in Ontario.
Yeah.
My paddling is a result of essentially moving to Hinton. I paddled a little bit, but moving to Hinton, and you're in your 20s. There's this training center, Blue Lake Center,
Yeah.
that had courses. Plus, you know, how did people connect then? We didn't have cell phones and stuff, but there were a whole bunch of like-minded people that were really interested in getting to paddle.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize this, but I've told this to Scott and to many people, and I have one more goal, is to get the next generation to find out we have 2 of the best whitewater learning rivers in the world. The Wildhay River and the McLeod River. You've got grade 1 water, 1.5. It's moving. You've got to be on top of, you know, there's sweepers, there's rocks, there's chutes, but it's a river that you can learn to be a competent whitewater paddler. And I'm consider myself incredibly fortunate that I had that opportunity by living in Hinton, you know, and there probably isn't. No, there isn't. There isn't a creek or a river around here I haven't paddled.
Yeah.
The Pinto or the Burland, or it goes on the Mayette and
You paddled the
Whirlpool.
Pinto, eh?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Right by the
It's
sheep.
on the
right
bucket
by the
list
goats.
to go through the Goats Canyon there.
Yeah.
Look at the mountain goats. But yeah, you got the Pinto, the Big Burland, the Wild Hay, Little Burland, the McLeod, Gregg River, of course, all at high water, Athabasca River.
Yep.
Sheep Creek can be pretty wild, eh? Up
And
in Grand
I
Cache.
have not paddled the Sheep Creek.
That's more of a
you
whitewater
talk to Greg
rafting.
Hoare about the Sheep
Yeah,
Creek.
yeah,
That's
okay.
a kayak river.
Yeah.
Or raft.
Yeah,
Or raft.
so you're right. There's so many great places here. Again, top secrets. Most people haven't even put a paddle in these places.
But
even the Athabasca River.
Oh.
Like I'll go and camp on the islands, and I'm the only one out there. And you find these old camps on the islands, and you can fish and have a fire. It's like this is a paradise in our backyard.
And as the crows flies from where we're sitting, that's 25 k's away.
oh
max.
yeah, it's right. It's right here,
You know,
and it's world-renowned river, right?
totally,
Yeah.
totally.
Would you be able to name like a favorite river? Do you have a favorite river?
Oh,
that
bar
you've
none,
done?
Wildhay River.
Is your favorite?
Yeah, and
Wow.
the McLeod's just behind it. But
I love the Wild
this
Hay,
was
too.
the
That's a good one.
first summer that I never paddled the Wildhay since 1978 or 79.
Really?
At least one run a year
Yeah.
on the Wildhay River, and it didn't come up like it was supposed to, and then I was away and
Yeah.
never paddled it. So it's definitely my favorite familiar. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a familiar. It's a good friend.
Do you have a bucket list river that you haven't done yet that you want to do?
Oh, I'm probably going to be. That is wonderful. Yeah, all the other rivers in Canada. Sorry. But But the thing is, I'm 76 years old, and there's obviously going to be rivers I never paddled.
Yeah.
I paddled the Nahanni, which everybody knows about. I paddled the Mountain. People don't know about that so much. I paddled the Churchill in northern Saskatchewan, the Clearwater, northern Saskatchewan. I mentioned the Mackenzie, yeah.
And the Columbia is pretty ripping
Columbia's.
too.
You know what I kept thinking about the Columbia, and it's the reality. You're paddling, especially when you get into the heartland of Washington, Oregon, it becomes a desert.
Yeah.
And that would have been a wild river with no dams.
And howling
A
winds.
totally
Yeah.
wild river, not tamed. Like
Yeah.
now there's about 8 or 10 dams
Right.
for hydro. And I mean, it was still good, but just think of that.
Yeah.
That would have been a wild river right through a desert. Like the Colorado through the Grand Canyon.
I always like the crazy stories, because those are the ones you want to tell your grandchildren if you survive. Canoe hazards for those of us who canoe: cold water shock, white water, strong winds, sweepers, hypothermia, submerged rocks, low water current, which a lot of people don't think about, strong winds, bear country, sunburn, mosquitoes, getting lost in the fog and rain. So that's just a small list of things that can happen. So when I make that list, tell us some of your best grandfather stories here.
Well, I think I told you this, Scott. I think I'll take it to my grave, and it was probably good that it happened. When I go paddling with somebody new, and you're looking at a river, and there's sweepers, and what sweeper are basically a tree that's on the bank, and it's come down, hasn't broken away, so you would have the branches and would be lying at right angles to the river.
Right, yeah.
You do not go anywhere near those at all, because if you go in, the canoe's going to go sideways, and you're going to be flipped over so quickly you don't even know what happened. And when I took a course with my first wife, we went in sideways into a sweeper, and I'm not kidding you, in a matter of seconds we were basically hanging over the log, and thankfully our canoe went underneath and came out the other side. A lot of times canoes get caught up in that, and you're not going to get them out till they come down. But even worse, people get caught up in that with their life jacket or something hung up in branches and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just you
can even drown with the sweeper.
big
I
time.
know of people that have got sucked under, and with
Totally.
a life jacket, the
Totally.
current's so strong, or wrapped a canoe, bent it
And
in
the
half.
thing about here, Scott, I think we alluded to it. If you're paddling a river in July in eastern Ontario, it's warm.
Mm-hmm.
The air, if plus 25, the water's warm.
Yeah.
You could be plus 25 here, and you're paddling the Brazeau or you're paddling the Athabasca. Well, the day before it was a glacier.
Yeah. Yeah.
Water.
Yeah.
So it's cold water. We have
Yeah.
cold water here. I mean, the very first thing that I bought after experiencing, I think the first moving river I did here was the McLeod. It might have been the Hay, but I think it was the McLeod. My feet were so cold, and I went out and bought booties, because I just couldn't believe how cold I was.
So do you wear neoprene as well?
I
then?
wear neoprene socks. Way back when we first started, everybody wore wetsuits.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a sideline. I think that's one of the few things in life that went down in price. Because when
Okay.
we were buying them, the only people that used them were scuba divers.
Right.
Like now
Yeah.
you get them everywhere, right?
Right. Yeah.
Now I don't. I wear obviously clothes that dry quickly. And speaking clothes,
Yeah.
denim is not a good thing to wear.
Oh, no, cotton
Not a
sucks,
good thing.
right?
It doesn't dry.
Cotton kills. Yeah.
No, you know all this stuff, Scott.
Well, I do know a fellow was paddling the Athabasca years ago, and he ended up dying in July. You talk about the meltwater from the glaciers. It's so cold. My son and I, we put in at Solomon Creek, for those who know the local area, and we used our paddle boards crazy on, class 1, little bit of rapids there, and we just had our swimming trunks on, and we made it without capsizing. And he's a very good balance with all the snowboarding and skateboarding he does. But I was like, that was too easy. I said, I'm going to jump in, and I jumped in right before the takeout.
Smart. That's if you're going to jump in, you did it at the right time.
And my goodness, it was like a plus 30 day, and that water took my breath away. Like the cold shock, I was doing that hyperventilating. That water must be close to 4 degrees Celsius, even in the summertime. And you're just like, that's how people drown, right? You get that cold shock and start sucking in.
I did 2 years of being a whitewater raft guide in Jasper.
Oh, cool.
And when you do that, you allow people to jump in, and they're all in wetsuits. You got them all geared up.
Yeah.
But you're not letting them jump in till you're like 2/3 of the way down the river, because they don't really realize how cold that water is.
Yeah.
And you definitely don't want hypothermia. And the same here. We had remember the raft company we had for a few years on Athabasca. I guided for him, and we wouldn't allow people to jump in until we got close to Muscota Creek.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because the same thing, you don't. And if people aren't doing anything, that's the other thing. Kind of the downside of canoeing. The only thing you're moving is your arms. The rest of your body's pretty inert. So if it's not moving, it gets cold. You're in trouble.
Yeah. Did you
know.
ever hit rocks, submerged rocks, and flip, capsize?
Of course. The reason I'm laughing, of course, you don't want to hit rocks, but that's why an evolution that happened in my time was plastic boats, which were Kevlar or ABS Royalex, and especially Royalex, a little heavier, but if you hit a rock, you weren't cringing. It's not like fiberglass or wood, So yeah, of course you hit rocks, and we always laughed that you painted a rock. It's probably a little green spot on it or red spot, depending on the color of your canoe.
With the brigades that are going on, like this year in the last few years, are people trying to use older technology, or are they like, okay, we're going to fancy new paddles?
All in on new technology.
Yeah, that's the way to
When
do it.
we did 2008, we actually had one fella that actually has taught outdoor education like voyageurs, and he actually slept under the canoe.
Okay,
He had a blanket, like he was hardcore. The rest of us were not. Okay.
He got eaten by mosquitoes.
Well, and then I think he moved into a tent. I don't.
Right.
No, but when I say, like, we are. What's the word when you reenact? We're not hardcore. You've seen people reenact the planes that Abraham wore, and everything is perfect. We're not like that at all. I mean, I would wear a Tricon, a Voyageur shirt, a sash, and be in shorts. So.
We do a question each week on the podcast, and the podcast question this week was your favorite piece of hand-me-down gear. I was just kind of going through some of the responses today. There were some good ones. Ashley said the old oil lanterns. She likes using those. Chris said he got Grandpa an old wall tent from his grandpa. Wow. Shauna got an ice fishing shack that was pretty good. Scott, you got a hand-me-down?
Yeah, my old uncle passed away. He was in Germany. He was a border guard there in northern Germany, and he had this sort of army military wool sweater, and I still wear it. It's in tatters. That thing has been everywhere. Lots of survival trips, lots of hunting trips, fishing trips. So every time I put it on, I remember him, and it's kind of neat.
I got a knife from my one grandpa that I use every time I go camping. And then I was going over with the wife today. I'm like, what's the other thing I always use? And I got a gun, like my rifle's 30-06 that was my grandpa's. And then like he hunted with that, and then he gave it to my dad. My dad hunted with it, and now I hunt with it, which is like kind of it feels cool shooting an animal with that has that history. So. Oh yeah, for sure. Anything come to mind for you, Rick, or something that you use that's like a hand-me-down?
Not that much. I found I did some this fall. We're going to have a big garage sale next spring. I found my dad's hunting knife, so I cleaned it up and sharpened it and stuff.
Cool.
But, yeah.
Is it old antler handle? I'm trying to picture this thing. What does it look like?
Yeah, it's kind of, I don't know how you describe it, like leather handle.
Okay.
I think it is.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Anything else good in the garage sale coming up in the spring here? We gotta
Pardon me?
Anything else coming up good in the garage sale that we should know about?
You want to give us
before?
some
Totally,
leads?
a lot of outdoor stuff.
Perfect.
A lot of
Nice.
outdoor stuff, and tool. Well, you don't need tools this place.
Yeah, I got a lot of tools. I got a little workbench here that was like my wife's grandpa built it, and just like all these like tools that he's 94 now and just doesn't use anymore. But he's like, hey, like you use this stuff, I'll give you these tools, and
That's
it's
wonderful.
It's nice having that kind of connection to some of the things there. So. Thanks everyone that sent in response to that. Another one too was a Canadian military rucksack too that Happy sent in. So yeah, thanks.
Well, I'll
for
tell you,
sending those in.
you talk military. My father was in the Canadian Navy,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, a lot of places in the world, legions are closing, right? And my dad, all his medals from the Second World War were in the Legion. They had a little display, and I was really concerned about that. And I talked to my brother, and thankfully, my niece took it, and I actually had his old album, and pictures of Corvettes and Navy guys and the whole world, that whole life during the war, and it's been handed on. So I'm very happy about that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yep.
Got to keep that stuff.
Yep.
If so, let's say you're someone that's never done this before, like any of the voyageuring, canoeing, or like that. What's the best entry point?
There is a really good website called, look up Canadian Voyageur Brigade Society,
Okay.
and bingo bango, there's tons and tons of information. And also, if people are locally in the Hinton area, like after this first brigade, I came back,
Yeah.
and Scott's aware of this. We have 2 Voyageur canoes and trailers and life jackets and paddles, every bit of equipment.
Oh, cool.
And you can rent it from the Northern Rockies Museum.
Oh, sweet.
Hinton,
Yeah.
so if you wanted to go out on Greg Lake with your family in a Voyageur canoe
Cool.
for $100 a day, I think maybe it's 75 or 100 a day, you
Yeah.
can get it.
Yeah, that's
So
great.
we
That's
have that,
great.
and yeah.
Yeah,
Let's do a
so
podcast live from a Voyageur canoe in the summer.
there you go.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, it's on my bucket list to do a family trip on Moline with a Voyageur canoe.
It's the only way.
Wouldn't that be
I'll tell you what the
fantastic?
good thing about that is that I like. You can get 4 people in there, or you could do 6. Don't get. I've done 6.
Yeah.
But the amount of gear you can carry,
Yeah.
it ain't a problem.
You need a big trailer though, or how do you transport something of that size? How do you transport?
Oh,
the
we have
25
there's
footer?
a trailer.
Okay, is that part of the rental?
Yeah, it's part of it.
Oh, well, there you
It's
go.
got, like
Perfect.
I can honestly say to you, if you went in to see Margaret Scott, you get everything you want for. It might be $100. It's $75 or $100.
Yeah.
Everything that you want,
That's
Cool.
great.
and top of the line.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
I like that. I think that'd be a fun
That'd be
trip
good.
this summer.
Good bonding.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
a good bond. It's a good thing with a family.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got to teach your 4-year-old to paddle there, George.
Yeah.
So he can pull his own weight.
Pull your weight. Yeah, we're switching in 30 paddles here. Get ready for this big switch here. Yeah.
Also, if people are interested, another plug for the museum. They are going to have 2 courses this summer in June.
Yeah.
One of them Voyageur Canoe Leadership, and another one Tandem. So same thing, Northern Rockies Museum.
Cool.
And I just found this out today.
No, that's
So I thought,
fantastic.
what the heck, I'd do it this way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
why not? Why not?
And Margaret Schultz is the
She's
head
the
lady
manager
there.
there, yeah.
Yeah, we love going there. It's they got a little water table there and a little sand table that Casey's a big fan of, and they got the train set in there, and
Yep.
it's
Oh, so you're familiar.
we spent a lot of time on that slide on the front that
Okay.
the
Yeah.
spin. Oh yeah, we've
Yep.
been up and down that thing 1,000 times. Yeah, we got to get her on the podcast too. I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's on the list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a question about lightning. The only reason I'm
Oh,
asking
perfect.
because I had a bad experience. Again, I was doing the Athabasca,
Wow.
which again for the folks here, if you put in Jasper, Old Fort Point, and you can head, oh man, all the way up to Whitecourt, Fort Assiniboine if you want, and further.
Sure.
But I got caught on Brule Lake with a buddy, and the lightning rolled in. We were in the middle of that lake, and it was striking. We could see the bolts hitting mountains, and you can't get off water that quick when you're in the middle of a big lake, especially that one, right? Because it's slow as molasses. And what's your rule? Like, did you guys get off the water? Because
I used the 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005. If it's inside that up to 1005, we're off.
okay.
And that's.
And if you're on a big lake, though,
Oh,
like,
you could
geez.
if you
You're
couldn't have
screwed.
been in a worse place.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking of you
no,
on
big lake and
Winnipeg.
not a lot of
or-
hiding
yeah.
spots.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
are the highest spot.
You're a sitting duck.
Yeah.
Literally, yeah. Yeah, no, it's nothing to be.
I
Nothing to mess
have
around
been
with.
in situations not threatening, but we got off the water because of lightning. Yeah, because it was just
Oh, yeah.
it's too dangerous.
No, it can hit,
way too
and
dangerous.
the impact. Anything in its wake is.
I think the
It's
thing
struck.
is you want people to have fun, but you got to remember you're in the outdoors, and Scott, you know that as well as anything. You got to be aware of your environment and tuned in to what the heck is going on.
Yeah.
So
Hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
oh,
right?
totally.
Yeah.
But I
what-
wouldn't have changed. Anyway, go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah,
sorry.
yeah. No, it's good to know. 1005. There you go. Patching your canoe. You must have had a few holes over the years. Are you a duct tape guy, or what do you do?
I've never punched a hole in a
Really?
canoe.
Wow.
We carry on.
And
Of course, it's going to happen this summer. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, maybe you've got better canoes than I do. I usually use duct tape, but I've got an old fiberglass that's.
I'll tell you a
sprung
canoe
leak.
type. If anybody's thinking of buying a canoe, material, you have a whole range. There's all kinds of different plastics, Kevlar, and of course you've got fiberglass and you've got wood.
Your old aluminum.
Do not buy aluminum canoe.
Lightning
because-
loves it.
What?
Lightning loves it.
And I think aluminum canoes have one good use, and we're sitting here with a sign that says Brewski Blazers. I think when the Brewski Blazers had a reunion, they should have aluminum canoe full of ice and beer, because it's the best
there you go.
beer cooler you can get.
We were at the parade there last Friday night, and we were looking at some of the floats. They had some really good floats, and you guys got me thinking. I'm like, we should do a Voyageur canoe. I want to do a Wilderness Wavelength float
Hey,
next year in the
there's an
Christmas
idea.
parade. So start thinking of ideas for that too, Scott. But now that Rick
Voyageur
mentioned
canoe.
the trailer, we
Yeah.
get the Voyageur canoe. We get some people in there paddling.
Get Rick in there dressed up as Santa.
And we've got lots of Voyageur outfits.
I like that
People
idea.
it's funny because
You need a beaver
we
hat,
thought
right?
of doing it, but we never ever stepped up. We didn't go to the next level. But if somebody is willing to, I know Margaret would be all in.
Yeah.
Be all for it. 100%.
Oh, that'd be fun. I like that plan.
The one thing people wanted to use a Voyageur canoe to use as a toboggan, and we said no because
Oh, my
you'd fly,
goodness.
but then you would have to patch them.
Force equals mass times acceleration. You'd be a freight train coming down, man. That'd be crazy. Yeah.
Can I tell you about online? There's a YouTube video. When we were in 2008, we got to the Kaministiquia River, which empties into Thunder Bay. It basically was 2 days from the end of, day 63. And we took a day off because what happened, the river was pretty high and stuff. And long story short, I was looking at this river and I go, this river, we got to play in this river, being a whitewater guy. So we had three Voyageur canoes, and we went and spent the day playing on the river. And how do you describe surfing? Do you know what surfing is in a canoe? Where you can have a canoe basically facing upstream. You've got waves coming at you, and you go into a trough, and if you've got the right dynamics, the right physics, you can sit there.
Right.
And you can kind of
Okay.
sing surfing music.
Hold
and,
your spot
and
there, yeah.
hot dog to the cows come home. You still
Yeah.
have to watch yourself. So if people want to see a really cool video of people surfing and playing in a Voyageur canoe, look up Surfing the Dog
Surfing the dog.
by Don McMurtry. And yours truly is right in there. On the cover of my book is me That's us surfing, and
Cool.
I'm my paddle is a baton. It was one of my on my whole paddling career. I had so much fun that day. It was right off the scale. Surfing the dog.
Have you ever hit a low head dam? You know, where people get caught in these
No, but I
entrapments?
know all about them. Tell them, people. That's
Well,
as dangerous as
it's
it
as
can be.
dangerous as it can get, and you can
Exactly.
capsize. You can get sucked down even with the life jacket. So, have you been in one of those situations?
No, I have not, because I know of them, how dangerous they are, and do you realize why? It's laminar flow, right?
Right.
It goes over and it's even. There's no place that you can escape.
Yeah.
It's the same intensity.
So-
I've heard of them. I know people have tried to do rescues. You know, people have been in trouble in a rescue boat, ended up in trouble.
Oh yeah, you'll keep tumbling, get sucked under.
No,
So for
I
folks
never-
who don't know what that is, imagine a drop in the water, and it looks pretty benign. You look
Oh.
at it and you think, "Oh, this thing's easy peasy," but there's sort of the turbulence there, and you can go on YouTube and see all sorts of horror stories of people getting sucked into these things.
And I think another thing that people should, it's back to cold water, and I've seen this up at Moline Lake, which is basically 100% glacier fed lake. And people, they rent their canoes or kayaks and they put on their life jackets because the company makes them do it. And they go around the corner and they take them off. They have no idea if they go over, if they're in the middle of Moline Lake, they are in deep, deep trouble if and not wearing a life jacket. They have no concept of cold water.
Well, we talked about this on the last segment with ice rescue. Doesn't matter. You could be Olympic swimmer in 10 minutes. You're done.
Yep.
Your muscles will seize. Doesn't
Yep.
matter how big and strong you are.
Yep.
Yeah, wear your life jackets, folks, especially in cold water
All the time.
all the time. Yeah. Well, that's just it. I remember doing some research on who drowns the most in Canada. You know who it is? It's men ages 18 to 35. The strongest swimmers in Canada. And because, they're
It's a macho thing.
macho testosterone, and they don't wear the damn life jacket. And so that cold water will take you out. Absolutely.
I wouldn't paddle without a life jacket, no matter how warm it is or where I am.
Yeah.
100% all the time. I got another good paddling story. Is anybody here, either of you two guys ever heard of the Shubenacadie River in Nova Scotia?
I have not.
The Shubenacadie River empties into the Bay of Fundy. What is Bay of Fundy known for?
The highest tides in the
Okay.
world.
So you basically, I was visiting a friend there, and he said, we're going to go paddle the Shubie. That's the And what we did is we went down, and he knew when the tides were going to come up. And the tides come up there. And what they do now, I was there 2 years ago, they actually have rafts with motorboats playing it when the tidal bore comes up. Well, we went up with the tidal bore in canoes. It's the craziest water I've ever been in my whole life, because nothing made sense. You kind of know wave trains, what they're going to do. You know, on water, this thing was just this massive water going up the river and just waves coming from every side. The color was brown because it's churning up it was just insane. But well, thankfully we didn't go over, but it was insanity.
Yeah.
Crazy
Wow.
time.
Wow.
Rick, we've been talking a lot about paddling and rivers and stuff. During the winter, what are you doing? Like, how are you staying active?
Cross-country ski, and
That's the move?
yeah.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be living here.
Yeah.
I've gone to paddled in New Zealand.
Okay. Yeah.
Paddled in England. I'll tell you why I like paddling in England. It'd be like Germany. You get in there. They rent you a canoe. I've rented canoes. They give you a life jacket, a bailer, paddles, and they say we'll meet you downstream 20 k's, and you end up at a pub.
Yeah. There you go.
Hello.
Yeah.
Bingo. Yeah. The cool. Well, one of the many cool things about Rick when I got to know him is he's an off the beaten track kind of guy.
Yeah.
So, most people will hike the trails as they should and don't
And
get
I do.
lost. But Rick's the kind of guy he'll just go explore the bush, and he'll find things that nobody else has seen. And through his explorations, I know in the Northern Rockies here, we've developed trails based on areas that he's found, and so that's really cool. So are you Well, that was before GPS. Are you a compass guy, or are you?
Oh, I
Going by the stars?
I used GPS in 2008. I was happy we had it. I always carry a compass if I'm going off. But you know what I like? I love Google Earth. It's like having
Yeah.
an aerial photo.
It's almost
somebody
too
who worked
easy.
like my background's forestry.
Okay.
I worked in land reclamation, so
Yeah.
that's the background as far as outdoor stuff with me. But I love it. It's like you've got an aerial photo you can use.
Yeah.
So it's a heck of a great tool. But and just for you two gentlemen, I probably know Switzer Park the best of anybody in Canada.
I believe it.
I've
I've
been
heard
in
you-
every corner of Switzer Park.
Yeah.
Every corner.
You've generated
No.
a few of the walking trails out there, and
Well,
Yep.
oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes.
Leave
Yes.
it
The
at
answer is yes.
We'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Friendly Vistas, Fish Creek,
Yeah.
Fish Lakes.
Fish Lakes. Back to canoeing here.
Yeah.
Solo canoeing.
Oh, I
I've
love
done
it.
very little of that. Are you a solo canoer? And
When
do
I
you
was-
have a special solo canoe that you use, a smaller unit? or-
Yes, when I was late 30s, early 40s, I did a lot of solo paddling. And what a solo canoe does is obviously it's all you, but
Yeah.
you can play a lot more. It would be like a big kayak. You know what I mean? You can't go to the same although having said that, apparently really good solo canoeists can do an roll, an Eskimo roll in a canoe.
Holy.
I can't. Okay, but we would do a lot of surfing, not only forward surfing, side surfing, which is
Yeah.
you really have to be cognizant of what that river's going. That's when you worry about laminar flow when you're going sideways.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's
Yep.
waiting. It's waiting to just flip you over
Sure.
immediately. So
Are
I
you
did a
on
lot,
your-
but not so much now because what happens is we did a lot of kneeling. You have pads and stuff. I can't kneel anymore. It hurts too much. It comes right down to that.
Well, that was my question. Do you have to kneel, or is there
well,
a sitting
you don't have
position?
to, but your center of gravity is lower,
Yeah.
and you're in bigger white water, and you want a lower center of gravity.
Sure. Sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
For listeners here, I think a lot of folks don't know that low water is dangerous in the fast rivers.
Oh,
And that's caught me by surprise because
Totally.
you're thinking of sweepers and big rocks, and suddenly you're in a fast current, but the water's 6 inches deep,
and you're bouncing,
and you're
the
bouncing.
canoe
That
is
could flip your canoe in a hurry.
Easily. I mean, you're changing. The ground is changing your angle of your canoe. Your weight might be at the wrong place. You might be leaning upstream. You should be down. Like you really have to be. You need enough water.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it comes back to when I said when we were going upstream, that really became something because we found less current near shore, but you really had to be cognizant of how much water you were in.
Yeah.
You know.
One last question from me here, Rick. When people are listening here and thinking of types of canoes, we talked about Voyageur canoes, but there's recreational canoes, kind of an all-rounder, touring canoes, solo canoes, whitewater canoes, and river canoes. What would you recommend for the average?
I would say
Joe
if you're
here.
going to buy a canoe, it's very simple because over the years, I got many, many questions about what kind of canoe you want. And
Yeah.
there's so many ways you can use a canoe, but the canoe that is all round, that works in moving water, moves in lakes, and would be the best bet is a prospector. A 16
Prospector.
or 17 foot prospector
Okay.
is your best all round canoe.
Does it
Bar
have
none.
does it have a keel or is it flat bottom?
Well, it's got a rounded bottom. There's no rocker. It's just a good canoe that you can go straight on a lake. If you wanted to move sideways a bit to avoid rocks and rivers, it's the best all round canoe.
16-foot prospector. There you go.
Can't lose with a 16-foot prospector.
And if prospectors listening, we do want some sponsorship
Right.
dollars.
send us a canoe to try out.
So I got one more thing if we're coming near the end.
Yeah.
In 2007,
Yeah.
CBC Radio had on, Sheila Rogers had, we're going to try to find the 7 wonders of Canada. Mm-hmm. And I was listening to it, and I always remember her talking, they're talking about prairie sunsets, which became one. Talked Niagara Falls, talking about all these kind of places in Canada.
Yeah.
And I remember her talking about igloos, and I'm thinking, yeah, that's kind of Canadian, but how many people know about igloos? And I nominated the canoe, and
Yeah.
it made the top 7 in Canada.
There you go.
And I was
Yeah.
like over the moon with that, and because and nobody. What surprises me is nobody else had done that. And then the judges, I was actually looking through it, how the whole essence of what we talk with the fur trade and opening up the country and nothing but water, and how Canada is joined by water with not a lot of portages required when you look at the whole vastness of it.
Yeah.
So I was very proud of that. And I just thought of that the other
Yeah,
day, and I
yeah.
looked it up online. So
Well, the
there you
rivers
go.
were the highways for decades and decades and decades.
We live on one of the Trans-Canada
Yeah.
highways, the
the
Athabasca River,
Athabasca River.
Columbia Brigade.
Yeah. You ever seen the spruce bark canoes, Rick? There's one in
No.
the museum in Edmonton there, the Alberta Museum. So everyone knows about the birch bark, but Indigenous people did the dugout canoes out of
Or how about David
cottonwoods.
Thompson when he got to the Columbia? There's no birch. He started using cedar. He
Oh,
basically
sure.
developed a cedar canoe
Was it
to
a
go down
probably
the
a
Columbia.
dugout? Yeah, but spruce bark canoes too, which is quite ingenious. So, yeah, works of art really that managed to transport people and goods right across this country.
Are you working on another book then, Rick? Like, are you keeping?
Yeah, I better get my butt going a little more. I call it rivers I have paddled, and I probably and what, if it happens, let's get that out of the way. Like I mentioned, the Wildey River. Wildey River might be 8 pages.
Yeah.
But there would be a creek that we paddled in Ontario, 100 meters is a paragraph.
Right.
So it's that.
Cool.
But I don't think it has an audience. It's just kind of my recollections
Yeah.
of yeah.
But like these trips you're going on, like you're keeping track and you're writing notes or you're recording
No.
still or no? No.
The only time I kept notes was 2008 with the dictaphone.
Yeah.
And I'm over the moon that I did it, and
Yeah.
I'm very happy I did that.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Rick's book, 21st Century Voyageur. You can get a hold of Rick at rickzro@gmail.com.
You want my cell number?
Yeah, we'll give him your cell phone number and
780-817-4623, and I text.
You want that number out in the
Oh,
public?
is that not a good one?
Well, I mean, sure,
Yeah.
call.
People from Sweden are going to be calling you tomorrow, man. No, that's all good. That's all good. You better do a reprint of your book.
Oh, I don't like the pressure. Okay. Are we done?
Well, thanks for coming on, Rick. We really appreciate it. Like, yeah, your energy is infectious, and I mean, you got some stories.
And you know, it's funny. Thank you for that, infectious, because I get that a lot from people. And it's funny, this book, a lot of people that read it go, Rick, you're just talking.
Yeah.
Like as they read it, they know
Hear
it's
it in your
me.
voice. Yeah.
It's that simple, and it's
Yeah.
a nice compliment.
That's super cool. Yeah.
Yep.
Follow along with Scott's Adventures, Rocky Mount,
Northern Rockies
Bushcraft. That's right, on Instagram. Hunting season over. Well, I guess you got elk coming up still, but ice fishing
Yeah.
season in full swing now. Yeah, you've been out doing some ice fishing already. And
I've been doing ice
Yeah.
fishing. Yeah. I won't tell you if it's good or bad, and I won't tell you where I'm going.
yeah.
And fishing for me, when I go on a wilderness canoe trip, that's when I really like to fish, because the fish, you know where I'm going with this,
Pristine.
Scott.
Yeah.
Pristine wild
waters.
fish.
Yeah.
No one else there would fish, and those fish I haven't seen
all
a
of
hook
the
before.
above.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looked like you were making fish hooks now too. Is that?
Yeah, I was tying some flies
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Wow.
Got to do that. Figure out what they're biting on.
Yeah, we'll do an episode of that too, because I know Aaron is big into fly fish tying. So maybe
Yeah,
we'll do
that would be a
tie some
great one.
flies on an
We'll do
episode.
that.
So what are you into for outdoor stuff? What's your life?
I'll do a little bit of everything. We this winter we're gonna do some snowboarding, Marmot Basin. That's
Have you been there this year?
Not this year yet. No. Is that on your list of things to do?
Well,
You
I
do
did. I
downhill?
did a lot of downhill skiing.
Yeah.
Not anymore. It's over. But
Yeah. Ice
Marmot,
fishing.
yeah.
Dad was. I got to show you pictures, Scott. Dad was out today at the one secret lake, caught some big brookies. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I'll show you guys pictures after. But
hunting. You're a hunter.
Hunting season over now. I got one deer, which happy with that.
How about you, Scott?
Oh,
Were you
for
lucky?
Deer? Oh, I almost feel bashful. We got 8 deer, and I helped another guy get another one. So as a family, but we got a big family, so we're not greedy.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I'm going for another elk. But I really am a subsistence hunter, so
I know that.
This is what we eat all year.
Yeah.
And
how many freezers you have?
We've got one of those big old prairie freezers. I don't know if they make them anymore, but this thing's probably from the 1970s, and it's chugging along.
It's so funny you say that, because the freezer we have, probably not as big, was
Yeah.
one of the first things I bought when I moved to Alberta in 1974.
Oh, yeah.
Still chugging away.
And they don't die, right? That old stuff just never dies. The insulation fell out of it. I had to stick new insulation in, but it just keeps chugging along.
Right on.
Does the job.
Well, thanks for listening, guys. If you want to get a hold of us, we got questions for Ask Scott. We'll get to in the next episode too, but you can fire those into wildernesswave@outlook.com. Leave us a review wherever you're listening, Spotify, iTunes. Great seeing that, and we'll talk to you next week.
Wilderness Wavelength.